Welcome to Batch Up 24. Pretty exciting, this one. E.H. Taylor, which we'll get into the single barrel when we get into the single barrel, which will be last. But also filtered beer. So anyone who knows me with whiskey knows I love to have a balanced diet, a beer and a whiskey together. So for these batch ups, we're started to bring the breweries in as well, which has been a great, back in the bar scene, we used to do a lot of dinners with Boilermakers. So really cool for everyone to be jumping back on board again. So we're going to start, for all those watching on Facebook and got their packs, with Filter XPA. That was not as cool as I thought it was going to be. Yep, there we go. And to pair with that tonight, we're going to have a Filter Rye.
Filter Rye.
Filter Rye, or do you mean the straight rye?
Sorry, yeah, the EH Rye. It's not a Filter Rye at all.
Yeah, no, that's right, mate. You've been live for like a minute, not even a minute. You've already
Thank you for joining, John.
That's why I'm here, just to call you out on your inadequacies.
We'll be here all night.
Yeah, so cool. Cheers. Just have a sip of beer. Hot night.
Anyway,
hey, David.
Thank you, Ray. It's good to talk again.
Thanks
for the pack.
Yes.
Yes. So, everyone
back
can.
To the old days, mate.
Pardon me?
Takes me back to the old days with a beer and a whiskey pairing. Oh, the good old days, huh?
That was we've had a few of those. We're talking about that earlier tonight before the stream, mate. How I think the last EH tasting you and I did together was we did the distillers lineup pretty much. So we did Elmer T or there's a flagship on every bottle. Eagle Rare, EH Taylor. What else did we have in that lineup? And it was actually with Filter. So we had the red ale with the small batch, which we're having again next, just to keep history true.
That's right. Yeah, and I managed to switch some of these barrel and batch glasses as well, which is great.
Yeah, well, you that's because you didn't get the T-shirts.
I didn't get the T-shirt. I'll take the glassware instead.
They're in the same pack, weren't they? What's going on?
Yeah, no, I don't get packs, man. You know what
I mean? Yeah, you do. You've got one right there.
Yeah.
I can tell.
That's smelling pretty good.
Sorry, I'm answering 100 messages, Rob. We go.
All right, school is in session, Ray. Turn your phone off. Tell us about the straight rye.
All right, let's get serious. Let's pour the rye. Let's go.
Pour the rye. Come on.
So you're already halfway through it. So I guess introductions. Milne and G are both from. Is Milne there? Where's Milne gone? Hang on.
We lost him.
Here he is. I've got no camera. This is a schmozzle tonight. Milne and G are both from South Trade. So, G, how long have you held the mantle for the Buffalo Trace?
At South Trade, almost 14 years now. Yeah, but working with Buffalo Trace on and off for the last 20 plus. So yeah, it's a good innings.
You've done well. So you probably know more about the brands and the distillery than, well, any of us here, I'd imagine. So based on the rye, I'm going to take it over to you, unless you want to give a little bit about Buffalo Trace or E.H. Taylor just in general.
Yeah, look, obviously we've got an incredible selection in front of us tonight, so I won't go too far into the Buffalo Trace kind of story, but it is the distillery where we make all this wonderful whiskey, so everyone knows that. E.H. Taylor, of course, is our founding father, and we celebrate that legacy with a number of releases, some of which are a bit more rare to speak of, a bit more scarce, and our only kind of single bottlings, which were, I guess, intentionally made as experiments. But if our distiller, Harlan Wheatley, will tell you about the amount of experiments going on there. It could be anything up to 60,000 barrels of experimental whiskey at any one time in Buffalo Trace. So some of them work, some of them don't. The ones that work might get into a bottling, and more often than not, if they are pretty incredible, then they get released under the H. Taylor label, which is it's pretty exciting. I know some of us have enjoyed things like the 18-year marriage and yeah, I'm not going to go into it. It breaks my heart to think there's none left. But yeah, we're here to celebrate these three. So E.H. Taylor, of course, dates back to the 1860s, where his vision is basically why we're sat here today, enjoying great whiskey. And it's down to this guy that we enjoy all of this wonderful kind of, American whiskey that's available today, just because he obviously set the benchmark really high, set out the standards of how whiskey was supposed to be made, spent a fortune on a brand new modern distillery, and then kind of kicked on from there. So lots to say about E.H. Taylor, but the key thing is, of course, the majority of the range is all bottled in bond, so we get that lovely 50% punchy weight of the whiskey, and we've got the rye, right, straight up, which is a bit baffling for a lot of people, I think, just because, or in terms of the mash bills, there's a lot of chat about what the mash bill is for E.H. Taylor rye. And
being an experiment, would it be the same every time?
Well, no, the rye has become a part of the core range for a long time. It was only released, I think, in like 2011 or 2012, something like that. So it's relatively new in that sense. But the mash bills that we always talk about at Buffalo Trace are the legacy mash bills, or I guess they're the historical recipes that we set out to produce the majority of our whiskey.
Aren't the mash bills of Buffalo Trace like Fight Club? You don't talk about Fight Club.
Nobody knows the exact percentages other than, obviously Harlan and the mash room
for us to talk about it because they don't tell us about it. So
yeah,
we know
about the mash bills.
We know there's 1, 2, 3, 4, but beyond that, we know nothing more.
But if you had to guess and give us some numbers, what would you say is the mash bill of this rye?
Well, look, when I first started working in Australia with Buffalo Trace, we had a gentleman by the name of Guy May who was traveling, and it was literally my first week in the job. And I went out on the road with him. We traveled around Australia, and he was talking about the straight rye, and he alluded to the fact that it might be a 95% rye and 5% barley, no corn at all. And so I've kind of held on to that over the years, but there is a lot of chat as to whether that has been adjusted. I mean, I'd still say that it's a very high rye content whiskey, unlike, the kind of Sazerac that we release being a low rye, lots of corn. And, those sort of 4 mash bills that we talk about being kind of 2 rye style bourbon, 1 wheated bourbon, and then our straight rye. At this particular point in time, we've probably got about maybe 16 or 18 different mash bills that are being played with and still sort of evolving into different profiles, different products, of which, some we might never see, but there's always experimentation with Harlan. So I'd suggest it's still pretty high. I mean, I'm not sure whether it's dropped from that 95. Andy, what do you think?
I kind of agree. I think there's definitely got to be a high rye. I think it's, generally speaking, most brands go one way or the other on their sort of rise. It's either a sort of 65, 70 or a 95. And I feel like we're definitely in that 95 space. But, to be able to decipher, I think the hard part is you look at our portfolio alone of rye whiskies that one would presume are using all the same rye recipe for E.H. Taylor, Sazerac, Thomas H. Handy, they all taste exceptionally different. And I think rye shows its difference in age as well so much that it's just such an impossible task to be able to sit there and go, yeah, it's definitely not a skill set of mine to be able to sit there and go, yeah, that's a 99, 95% rye. Because so many other factors can change that. And I think
and then you got look at the mash bill with Thomas Handy and Sazerac, and then obviously this fits into it too.
But I think as a distillery, what do we talk about the most? We talk about distillation, but it's about maturation and warehousing. And warehousing to us is probably the biggest factor in how our whiskies are produced. And the same recipe can be producing multiple different styles of whiskey across the rye recipe across Buffalo Trace, George D. Stagg, Eagle Rare, E.H. Taylor Small Batch. They're all the same, but from different warehouses and different racks and locations and heights. So it's an impossible task, I would say.
So this special doesn't share the same as like Van Winkle Ryes, Handy's, Sazerac 18s?
It's supposed to. It's meant to come out of the same, base spirit. So going back to that sort of, kind of legacy recipes and mash bills, it's all apparently, and we're supposed to believe that it's all out of that one rye mash, right? Which is quite tasty on its own. As you can see, that bottle is almost empty. But yeah, I don't know. I think there is a question to be asked there about, once upon a time saying that the E.H. Taylor straight rye was a mash on its own. It was a recipe on its own that created this one brand. So yeah, tasting it, I think, given its profile and the amount of depth of spice that's in there, I'd say that it is really up that sort of 95% kind of rye, which kind of goes against that idea of it being the same recipe for the Sazerac and the Thomas Handy, right? I know that the Sazerac that we produce has got a lot more of that fruit spice involved, and I'm a big fan. You probably heard me talk about that a lot in the past. The balance in that is incredible, but I think that there's a lot more fruit that comes from the corn in that mash bill, whereas this is a lot more of that kind of dry, bitter spice that you get from a hell of a lot of rye. So. But it's open to debate, right? That's what it's all about.
It's real. Oh, sorry. Sorry, just want to ask a question. Barrel-proof rye, are they in the country?
They would you believe, Fidel? They released them at the distillery on the Wednesday, and our tour was on the Thursday. But they had them in the bars. We went to Neat and everything. They had them in the bars by the Friday.
Yeah.
Awesome.
I got to admit, those Buffalo Trace tours now, everybody wants to go in them because now they're releasing all the allocated bottles in the gift shop. I just saw like a whole row of like Thomas H. Handy's all up for sale.
Well, there you go. Let's go.
I went through to New Zealand last week, and they had some Thomas Handy in the in Sydney Airport. I didn't buy any, of course, but I took some photographs. Yeah, it's unusual to see it actually more frequently these days here, because in America, of course, it's impossible to find. But yeah, we're trying every year to get more and more into the country, so hopefully we'll continue on that trajectory. And of course, with the help of Ray bringing in all these wonderful barrels, then yeah, lots more.
Unfortunately, you don't get the vatting, but you get a single barrel version, which I think is pretty good. I should also add, Vidal, they released it on the Wednesday, so it was long gone by the Thursday. So I didn't even get a sniff at a bottle. It was gone in minutes, unfortunately. But yep, that's how it goes. And Filter XBA, who's enjoying that? How good's that?
Yeah. Nice.
Corey's still a no. He'll get there.
Yeah.
We'll get him there.
Just down the road from me here in Marrickville. Good little spot. Nice.
I love that straight rye. I get like, you know, bit of stone fruit and like pickle juice. I just can't shake the pickle juice on it. I'm normally just picking up so much spearmint in the rye that I have. But this doesn't really have it. To me, this is more like dill and pickle juice, which is not bad because I also love dirty martini. So it works pretty well.
And the nose is really perfumed. Like this right here, the perfume nose and the florals. It's a really pretty feature.
Yeah, it's I mean, there's some available at the moment, but it's in and out all the time, isn't it, G and Milne? You're not like the rye's certainly not been very consistent. That's for sure.
It's not so for us as a market, a consistent supply. So small batch. I mean, everything that Buffalo comes out of Buffalo Trace is an allocation. So we are given an annual allocation of Buffalo Trace, Eagle Rare, Sazerac, and everything else. Obviously, the allocations of certain things are easier than others. And small batch is the same thing from EH Taylor is on allocation to us. But that is probably the more consistent products that we are able to access year in, year out. From that, then the special releases, things like the straight rye, Warehouse C, and all the special releases that have sort of come year on year. We get small parcels of them, but it's not guaranteed, and we don't have a sort of a constant flow of them. When we run out, we then have to wait until more is made available to our market.
Did anybody ever get to try the Tornado Surviving release? Yeah. That was incredible. I was in Louisville visiting the distillery and in a bar in what was it called? Oh, Proof on Main. I don't know if anybody's been there. It was a fantastic bar.
Great bar.
And they had a bottle there, and they had several different EH Taylors, and so I kind of had to do the Pepsi challenge and got the bartender to pour out several EH Taylors, just to sort of, make sure that it wasn't just a bit of a marketing gimmick. But yeah, I found that there was a huge difference in the flavor profile, and of course that can be obtained anyway by selecting barrels from different floors of different warehouse and that sort of thing. But yeah, there was a marked difference all from Warehouse C just in that profile. So I was pretty impressed by it. But I think going back to those releases, like the Amaranth, I think was just a phenomenal whiskey. And again, that was an experiment whereby they produced a certain amount of liquid, put it into barrels, and then figured out if it was going to make a bottling at the end of the age. So if it works, as I said, if it works, some don't, some do. They work, and maybe they get released under the EH Taylor label, which is pretty cool. Nice thing for that.
Are we going to see a flood release?
He's onto it straight away.
The flood release when part of the Buffalo Trace distillery.
Well, we'll have to wait another 7 to 9 years for that, mate.
But I think it is probably the most experimental brand in the distillery, and you're talking about the Warehouse C Tornado. That kind of was the catalyst to inspire a lot of the Warehouse X, Warehouse X experimental collection. And one of the early projects they did with that was try and replicate. We had with Warehouse X, we can take the roof off, we can expose it to the light, we can expose it to elements and heat and things. And that was the first test, or was one of the first tests, was looking at it from that perspective and going, okay, well, let's see if we can replicate Tornado Surviving EH Taylor. And went through this whole process, did everything, and it was a dud. And you know, it was nothing. Yeah, I haven't tasted the whiskey, so I don't know if it was a bad whiskey, but it was nothing like the E.H. Taylor that was released. And just goes to show that the natural aspect of whiskey making is, you know, completely at the sort of default of the seasons and the elements, but also the different warehouses will produce different things. And you know, I think the advantage of and the fun of E.H. Taylor is that things that experiments out of experimental collection that we think have worked and have been interesting, and I think even 4 grain I've heard whisperings of, will be replicated and will come back under that name. So
we might get a bottle or two. Who knows? I remember about 14 years ago, and I was talking to G tonight about it. I still swear that we're on that same tour, G, but maybe you forget or I forget we're getting on. And it was the first trip South Trade took me over with, and we did the Buffalo Trace, and Harlan took us down to, as you're saying, experimental thing. It was literally like an outside glass house with just barrels kind of sitting in. We want to see what they do. And then really cool was about 10 years after they started bottling those little Buffalo Trace experimental collections. So getting to try some of those that were out there was really, really interesting.
Yeah, Harlan's quote is, you know, they've got a tasting panel there, of course, you know, and there's a number of them now that work in shifts, and they ensure all of the barrels are tested and sampled and unanimously decided. Yeah, I know. I think that's why they've stopped me going for the distillery now, because
you apply every year.
I keep hounding people to give me that job. But yeah, it's weird that you know, he used to say that even just in their testing, like on a day-to-day basis for their you know, palate and that, he's like, you know, these guys don't know bad whiskey. They've never tasted bad whiskey. You know, I know bad whiskey. I've made it. You know, that's it's like, whereas he's pulling them up on obviously the real fine lines of flavor profiles and consistency. So yeah, there's never a bad barrel that hits the tasting panel, but it's quite funny that he's quite blunt about the fact that, you know, there is no bad whiskey in here, but I've made plenty of it, which is pretty cool. Experiments that go wrong. One of the best ones, I think, was his rice whiskey. It was great.
Rice whiskey. How was that?
Not good.
Not good.
Yeah, he had to go. He made some whiskey out of rice, and yeah, I think he'll tell you as well. It was one of the ones that he just wasted a lot of time on that. Anyway, back to the good stuff.
How's everybody's rye and everything going down? Thoughts on the rye? Would we drink it again? Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. So you said the availability is a bit sketchy. So what's that? We can get it from you guys, I assume. What's it worth a bottle?
$270. What's it worth and what's it cost are two different things. But yeah, it's $270 the rye. I don't know if it's much better out there. Yeah.
I think that's bang on. That's a really good price. I think I've seen it for a lot more, just simply because of the availability that we've struggled with over the last few years. And yeah, I think it's just mentioned, you know, it's been in and out for a little while, but we try and secure as much as possible. I know Andy's constantly battling with the US to get more, but yeah, I think that's a really good price, especially for, you know, what you provide.
So, Joe, what's the issue with availability? Because we only see it like maybe like every 1, 2 or 3 years. Like it's a yearly release, but we only see it like every 2, 3 years.
Yeah.
Like,
well,
is it just a production?
I think it's just basically down. I mean, Andy will probably you know, elaborate on this, but I know that it is down to the production levels that they create there at the distillery. So this kind of makes me go back to the fact that, you know, I'm still on that kind of viewpoint that it might be that particular recipe, that mash bill, that is just making one particular style of spirit, of whiskey, because otherwise you would have more. You know, if it was in a mash bill where we're creating Sazerac rye and that sort of thing, which of course, since its launch in like 2005 or 6, we've been playing catch up on demand for that product, right? So fortunately, they've caught up, and us in Australia, New Zealand, we came off allocation around about a year ago or 18 months, something like that, which was great. But there's a lot more of that in the market, and that sort of, again, kind of leads me to believe that this is just one of those recipes that it just makes a single product, and therefore there's not that much of it, right? But yeah, I don't know, Andy, if you want to elaborate on that, that's my kind of taking on it. We do get some every year, but of course the levels kind of fluctuate, and yeah, it's one of those products that I think when it comes in, it goes straight out.
I think what you're saying there too, G. Also, it's pretty clear. Like, we're getting a much better a steady source, but even that is coming from the single barrels and selections that we've been growing for the last 5 years. What we've been doing, like, the amount for our next allocation is awesome. It creates a consistent flow for what we're doing, and again, that's single barrel stuff, but also it allows us to bring that price back. We've got a few coming out this year that you've seen before that the price is gonna drop consistently, and that's considerably, sorry, and that's due to everyone supporting what we're doing and building and growing it and making it happen. And I think with the rye, though, it's just like everything has been in the past. It's just you got what you're given at one point, and when it comes in, we get what we're given, and that's how it's worked.
I think we've nailed it. To be a bottled in bond, it has to be a minimum of 4 years. Let's be honest, this definitely isn't 4 years young. They don't disclose that information, and they don't talk about it. So I'm not going to speculate on an age there. You probably have more backside conversations that could hint that way. But the biggest challenge we have as a distillery is when Mark Brown, who is our former CEO, joined, he created a 25-year plan for the business and a 25-year volume plan for the business. And I think within 3 years or 4 years, we'd hit the 25-year volumes. So we have a massive stock problem, and we're chasing our tails constantly and keeping up with growing markets globally.
And it's just like one of us retailers calling you and going, "Oh, that's on it real quick. Can we get some more?" You can't just think. The difference is also you. It's another year before you even see it again. So
yeah, and I think that's the challenge that the team in the US have that I do not envy, is they have to sit there and understand, how do we allocate? This is how much we've got that's good and ready to be bottled this year. How do we allocate that out fairly, and how do we get that across? And we have priority markets and we have various other markets, and the US is the number one priority market on the majority of the side of things. Then we have probably about 5 or 6 different markets that are major markets, and Australia sort of has set on the cusp of being into that secondary primary, and so we're always just chasing what we can get, but showing that we're doing great things with the brand and great things with the product. So
it's a filter. What we're trying to put out there is keep asking, we'll keep asking, and they'll keep asking.
Yeah.
All right, you got the Eagle Rare 25. You get all these allocated bottles that, to be honest, like most of anywhere around the world, they're not going to see.
The constant nagging and the constant focus on certain things that we want has really helped. We spent years campaigning for Morwella, and we've got Morwella. E.H. Taylor's probably the next brand that we're going to campaign for. So,
and Milne, how do they perceive us over there, us Australians? Like, do they see that we punch well above our weight when it comes to good bourbon whiskey, or do they see us just as a baby market down south? How do they look at us organically, so to speak?
Drunks.
No, we're a very, very important market. Yeah,
we're the size of a single state in the US. Let's be honest, like that is a simple fact. But I've hosted Drew Mabel, our master blender, twice in the last couple of years, and he leaves every time. The tastings and the events that I've done with him, he's outstanded by the knowledge, the expertise, the intrigue of Australian consumers, and I think that really is the sort of the bit that puts us above a lot of other markets where we're not just volume for volume's sake. We are volume across the entire breadth of our distillery, and it's exciting for him that you've got people that are excited to be drinking Buffalo Trace and know everything all along the way. And then you've got other people that are just experiencing Benchmark for the first time, but you can see from every other consumer where they can lead and where they can go. So
You're right.
we're
speaking of Benchmark, when are we getting the range of Benchmark's products?
I did say keep asking, didn't I, Vidal? He'll go through.
No, this is Benchmark. I want the full proof. I want the bottled in wines. Hey, give me the range.
We're going to move on to the small batch now. And the red.
Oh, that's good deflection. Good deflection.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Back onto EH. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
We've got a
well, look,
big
whilst you're talking about that, Dave, I think to add what Andy just said there, yes, we are small in size, but Sazerac as a company has, big plans, big aspirations, and we are an important market in their global footprint, right? So, the UK and Australia are seen to be a very important, if not critical market for us to expand. And so, really in terms of the Buffalo Trace distillery, we're still in our infancy here, right?
Sure.
As much as I can say it's been 14 years, working with the brand and trying to promote and do tastings and stuff like that, we've still only scratched the surface with what we can achieve. So you guys know yourselves, there's a hell of a lot more bourbon available on the market these days than there ever has been.
Yeah.
And, long may that continue, because the more the merrier in this category, it just brings more and more people into the category. So then we can, try and get liquid on lips and decide, people as kind of favorites, or at least give them an opportunity to have a taste. But yeah, definitely very important to them. So I think that we will continue to push the button on allocations and more of it. And I think that the single barrel program is just, that's just kicking off as well. I mean, Ray has been instrumental in the success of that so far. Not to blow smoke up his ass.
You get
no, but look, the same. I mean, the numbers that we've been bringing in terms of single barrels have skyrocketed. So it means a huge difference to the consumer. We're able to get our hands on some liquid that might not necessarily get here in terms of the selection, and also then we can do things like this, taste those products against the core range, and then actually get a bit more of a kind of a scope or a grounding on exactly what's going on there. So
sure.
We'll have lots more whiskey coming in very soon after this expansion program that's been going on for about 7 years. Hopefully we'll have a lot more juice. Anyway, Ray, I'm pouring my small batch.
Yeah, I hope so. Small batch with a red. I'll just jump in on the filter. How good's beer?
Right? Seductively beer.
Yum down in my tummy. It's fantastic.
One of my favorite everyday drink is this one, right?
Oh, the red, you like it? Yeah, it's
always
great.
Love the red. That and the Henson Park draft, because they sponsor you.
I love a red. I love an old or a dark of any sort. But the filter have supported this and supplied all the beers for everybody to have tonight. So cheers to them. It's very awesome. But also, you can't sip without. When you say cheers, you got to sip.
That is very good.
But also, this is they're very fresh, very new. They almost didn't make it in time to actually get them to send it out. So fresh batch, and the idea is obviously reds and olds as we're moving into winter. And if you follow filter and you have had it over the years. The reds are in and out, and then they do their doubles. And when we get to the old, they do their Caribbean stout, which is insane. Just a really cool little craft brewery in the inner west. So obviously you can get the beer from them, but now we have retail stores as well, obviously online. So if you do love them, which I do, jump in and grab them because they're fantastic. And if that's an everyday for you, sir, you're having a good day every day. Have you tried the double red, Dave?
Yes.
Yep. Or double red or
No, I have. Filter was one of my go-tos when we were living in Sydney and in that area. Filter and batch just down the road and sauce just up.
Yep. So G, bit of a cheers to history repeating, mate.
Yep.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. We'll go there again someday in person. Yeah, I do love the red. It's such a great beer.
All right, let's chat about small batch and the massive amount of mixed reviews out there. One thing I'll bring forward is what I love to see about the small batch is the price. What we were looking only not even 12 months ago, and this is what we're talking about getting it more available. It was $220. You would see it full. Sub 200 didn't happen much. Now you're looking at about 150 for the small batch, and that's awesome. Pardon?
It was $99 at Langton's.
Yeah, well, we're not Langton's, are we?
Yeah, but look, even that, I think that, again, there's a crossover there between the old stock and what's been more sort of recent in terms of availability and pricing, because that old price was, you said, like literally almost halved, which is an incredible move for us because it became more accessible. But also then, I mean, I say on my travels, I pop in and out of different bottle stores and stuff, and there's still bottles on shelf at $2.90, which you kind of just go, that's not really going to move, but they'll just let it sit there. Somebody will buy it. I was in a store the other day, which I won't name, and I actually offered him a couple of bottles just to bring the price down to move them, because he's sitting on about 2.5 cases. But no, he wouldn't move. Anyway.
So
the idea with the small batch now is that it's so much more accessible, and I love that because it is just incredible liquid.
Can you meet up with demand since the price drop? Because I know that once it got dropped down to 150, like you just saw like a tsunami of people started buying them at 150. Like
can
you still get the demand?
We had a very brief difficulty towards the end of last year, the beginning of this year, where we exceeded volumes and run out of stock. And I'll be honest, that is probably less a case of stock availability and more a case of it went faster than we thought to put it into a process as part of our business to make sure that we have stock at all times. And so that's probably more of a forecasting issue from our side, where we just suddenly had a bump and we just, couldn't react to it quickly enough, given that we're so far away from the US. So anything that sort of, when we need it, it takes another 3 months to get it back. But from what we've getting from the US and the information that we're getting, the pricing strategy we have now allows us to have a consistent supply year in, year out based on our current forecasts. If it goes gangbusters and flies even more, then probably being a problem. It's a fine balance. But the goal is to make it consistently available at a solid price, rather than having to put it to a premium price to maintain that consistency, or have it in and out, which for a SKU like this, I don't know.
Well, it's a stepping stone to the single barrel, right? A small batch.
Yes.
Yeah, out of that same mash bill as Buffalo Trace. So, we can safely say that, this is definitely out of mash number one. It creates, benchmark Buffalo Trace, Eagle Rare, and all of those wonderful, products that are aged for longer, like the Eagle Rare 17, the George T. Stagg. So the small batch comes out of that same mash bill, but the variations, of course, in all of those whiskies, not only because of their age, but just in all the flavor profiles that sort of bounce out of the aromas in these whiskies are incredible. And the small batch, I think, it kind of really does tick a lot of boxes in terms of your enjoyment levels of a bourbon. Having now moved on from the wonderful world of rye back into bourbon.
Yeah, I love the it's got like, for me, a mustiness of it. This one. I've just got a question here from Steve O'Neill on Facebook. Does small batch have a consistent particular flavor profile, or does it differ from between batches? So I guess we can say that yes, it's going to differ between batches because small batch, so it's made for a consistent palate, right? But to get exactly the same, and when it comes to small batch world, I was going to bring up before that it's so divided. Some people just don't like it, and I think that might be because of price it used to be, rather than having an approachable price now that you could reach to it again. But small batches, what do you think, Milne or G or anyone else?
Yeah, look, I mean, I think the short answer is that because of the process, because of the way that we select the barrels and then have this kind of final, everything goes through the tasting panel, and their job is to basically pick that flavor profile for consistency. So, I think from batch to batch, if you were right there on the spot and you were able to pick out the various, maybe a slight variation, then you'd be a genius, because there's no way that you're stopping a galloping horse between one batch to the other in terms of the final product. Definitely with the barrel selections, then you get a lot more variations because of that. The change in flavor profile that happens from barrel to barrel. But yeah, the job there is to create a consistent product so that the consumer can safely go into a bottle store or a bar and buy an E.H. Taylor small batch and get that product that they're expecting.
Got another question on the small batch too, G, from Brad. How big is the small batch? Or is a small batch? I think you mean.
It's interesting. Yeah, it's a great question, actually, because there are no regulations as to what small batch is in terms of bourbon production or American whiskey in terms of a distillery selection. You can have some bourbon distillery, or some distilleries will have small batch on a label, and for them it might consist only of a handful of barrels. Could be into tens or so. Others it might be into the hundreds. So you kind of, you got to do your homework on certain things like that. You're going to try and dig underneath and find out what the numbers are. I mean, for us, as I've always been told, we pick small amounts of barrels for this as a batch, but then we call them lots, right? So if a batch is picked and the flavor profile is unanimously decided, then that goes off to bottling, and then we'll bring in another. But this selection comes down to about 35 barrels at a time for a tasting, and that is then agreed. And obviously, if one barrel doesn't make the grades, then that just gets put back. But then, we're not just bottling 35 barrels at a time. That would be ridiculous. Otherwise, we'd only get 5 bottles a year. So we're putting those barrels then into, a lot, which is then again tested at the end, sampled to make sure that the consistency is there before going to bottle. But yeah, small batch is a bit of a confusing one. Don't believe the hype.
Don't believe the hype. There you go. You heard it here first. Small batch. It's been some awesome and a wide range of tasting notes on this coming through as well.
Yeah. Interestingly, I don't talk about awards very much because I can't keep up with them at Buffalo Trace. They're just too many to get my head around.
You may as well drop it right here, G. The most awarded distillery in the world.
Just drop your guts.
Look, I just, because I am a big fan of the small batch anyway, so I was doing a bit of digging around, and the last couple of years, it's actually picked up a couple of double golds in the internationals with San Fran is probably the most notable. But, the the Fred Minnick competition, or if you like, the judging panel that he puts together. It's called Ascot. Yeah, Ascot. So it's just won, I think it's the last 2 years, 23, 24. It's got a double platinum for those two, which I think is incredible because, you know, you're assured that they are bottles that are tasted completely blind. Not blind as in, you know, 3 a.m. coming out of filter, but blind as in you have no idea what's in the bottle. And that, I think, is testament to the consistency play there, right? You know, the guys that are actually involved in selecting the barrels and putting that flavor together. So that's a pretty good accolade, I think.
I think it's won 19 major awards in the last 24 months.
Jesus. Wow.
And that's, you know, across International Spirits Challenge, Ascot, World Spirits Competition from Sanfan, Denver International Spirits, World Spirits Competition, San Fran, Singapore World Spirits Competition, like Masters, Whiskey of the World.
Couldn't get one a month, could it? Hey, drop short. Yeah, make a good bourbon.
There's not enough competitions, clearly.
Well, that's what I'm saying too, and I think sometimes a price point can really put a taste in your mouth that, you know, it's something you don't want to go back to. But this is at 50%. It's a sessionable dram. It's anyone who hasn't enjoyed small batch in the past, I say revisit it because it's a cracking bourbon. I think it's fantastic. So that's my take on that, and I'm out. See you later.
Yeah, I'd be interested to see what everybody thinks about the age on this, because again, it's not an age statement. I've talked about it in the past with different tastings that I've been involved in, but what does everybody think about that?
I'd be akin to Buffalo Trace, mate. That same 8 to 10 spot is where I'd sit it personally.
Yeah. So is there agreements, disagreements with that on the chat?
I don't think it matters that much. I just think it's really easy to drink. Good flavor. Like, ticks so many boxes.
Yeah, that's quite refreshing to hear, actually. With a lot of people talking about age, it's actually quite nice to hear somebody just, you know, picking flavor rather than age. I think that there's too much time spent on worrying about whether it's been in a barrel for, you know, 4, 6, 8, 10 years or whatever. If it's good juice, then get it into a bottle, right?
Yeah, that's it. Look, absolutely. I've had some, you know, phenomenal 4 or 5-year-old whiskeys. I've had some great 15-year-olds and some shocking 20-year-olds. You know, it's all it's all relative to the spirit, the distillery, the conditions, and what it is. And yeah, I don't have an answer for it. I sort of agree with Ray, but for once, but you know, yeah.
The cameras off your eyes, agree.
It's definitely great on the palate, right? It fills up the palate. Really
and
nice.
Also, anyone, I suppose I probably should have said this earlier too, like that. I always say that just when drinking beer and whiskey. So, love to hear about the pairings. You know, how you find the beers go with the whiskey, but you've got plenty of beer and a decent amount of whiskey for free people. For me, it's always interesting to have the whiskey and then the beer, and then flip it up and have the beer and whiskey. I always find that when you're having the Boilermaker, one way is better for that pairing. It's always better. I've enjoyed having the beer before the bourbon on this one, but yeah, it's always interesting to hear. I like it.
And you know, whiskey always tastes better when you're surrounded by good friends, which is why I'm having such a hard time tonight.
Yes.
You know.
Of course.
And unfortunately, people, he's here all night. No.
Have you increased your fee, John?
I think like one thing we've probably not touched on, that we've talked about E.H. Taylor being, you know, he was more in the early days of our distillery and a very important player in bourbon. But I'll let G lament. But do you want to just talk, because with everything that we're drinking is bottled in bond, which is probably one of the most regulated bits of bourbon. American whiskey. So, G, do you want to just sort of talk about?
I'll just jump in there too. It's really interesting to see a core range as it is in bottled in bond.
Yes. Yeah. Well, it's an honor of that man that was such a pivotal part of our distillery at that time.
Yeah, I think going back to that sort of period where he'd spent so much money, time, and effort in creating this wonderful whiskey, then only to see so many, like, I don't know, I'd say rogue producers, and you got all your kind of bootleggers and moonshiners and stuff. I mean, they used to say that in the hills, at nighttime, you could just see all these little tiny lights in the hills, and it was just every time you saw a little flame dotted in the hills, it was all an illegal stills just burning away. And he had a vision, of course. This guy was a pioneer, and his vision was that whiskey was made a certain way to a certain standard. And, because of that, he went to some lengths to work with the US government to introduce that Bottled in Bond Act in 1897. And yes, it had a further kind of element of restriction to it because, you had to do certain things. But I mean, we'll touch on them in a sec if you need to. But I think that the beautiful part of that was that not only did he safeguard the spirit for there and then, but then it was for generations to come, right? Because you lay down this kind of structure and regulation, which meant that then, whiskey was protected in that sense. I mean, it still went, obviously, the bootlegging still went on for many years. Prohibition kicked in 1920. And without him knowing, I think at the time, what he'd set the distillery up for was that we were able to continue production through Prohibition with a license to produce medicinal whiskey. And the idea then, because he'd already worked with the government on this Bottled in Bond Act, is that we had all this wonderful regulated whiskey to be able to go into the pharmacies, which would have been the bars at one stage. Can you imagine how many bars flipped into pharmacies during Prohibition?
Well, almost like the distilleries here becoming hand sanitizers through COVID. So
that's right.
Imagine that.
Yeah. Look, Bottled in Bond was an incredible move, and of course we honor that in terms of the tradition and the style of whiskey that would have been produced. And it was reported that back in the day you were able to get a prescription for a pint of whiskey, which would have been pretty cool if you were a sick person in Kentucky.
My doctor gives me the prescription for the reverse.
Yeah, you got to
too much whiskey.
Find a new doctor, mate. I'll give you my doctor's number. Yeah.
I'd like something else on the old moonshine thing. If you guys want a little bit of trivia, we love a whiskey and Coke over here, but many of you might know the drink Mountain Dew. Mountain Dew was actually designed and a mixer made and called Mountain Dew based off the name moonshine to mix with whiskey. And it's only going to be a matter of time before that gets shut down because you can't underage drink. So there you go. Mountain Dew made to mix with whiskey.
I've heard that pretty phenomenal Tasmanian single malts go well with Fanta as well. You might want to worry about that one.
And Dr. Pepper too.
Anyway, Mountain Dew. There you go. The adult soft drink. Let's move on to the single barrel. Everybody here in home.
Finally.
Oh, I could just see Vidal scratching.
Reason for it.
I got some more picks. I've got like Harrods from London, the Whiskey Hunt Australia one, and then your one.
Well, I know which one's the best.
Is it too late? Is it too late to mute Vidal? Or
I think it's about time to remove him. He hasn't really contributed at all so far.
What are you talking about? He got dressed up for this occasion. Look at him.
He's looking
Stupid.
beautiful.
Man, I'm in my
This is
drinking
Aaron's
uniform
whiskey.
right now. I'm going to pass out like in my chair.
Now, just so you know, everybody, I love a filter old. It's a delicious drink. But if you ever see the Caribbean Stout, and it's called Caribbean Stout because you use a Caribbean yeast, it is an absolutely phenomenal drop. Not like this isn't the old, but the Caribbean Stout is bang on. I think it's 6.5% or something as well. So, you know, I like whiskey. I like ABV.
Are we
I'm okay with
doing
that.
the are we doing the orchestral crack?
Yeah,
Oh,
I was about to ask the same. Well, Ray, it was your idea, mate.
I know, but nobody else listened. So I've
Oh,
just
you've opened yours already, have you, Ray? Oh.
yeah, I have.
Right.
All right, 1, 2,
Okay,
3.
so who's going to count it in?
1, 2, 3, go!
Ah, it's beautiful.
There's that sound again, Ray. There's that sound, baby.
The orchestral crack. That's what I've
That's
called
right.
it.
We'll fix it in post. We'll make it louder. That's fine.
Yeah. Where did the bass drum come from? Don't worry about it.
Yeah. I'm absolutely just going to put an ad over Vidal, just like an ad for anything. I don't care. It could be an ad for Mountain Dew at this point.
Anyway, I would just like to say a few things about this before we get into the single barrel program. It is awesome to finally share this. This was not a barrel and batch pick originally. So I tried to get E.H. Taylor pick for ages. Milne, you probably remember I asked you way back in the day, and then Adam, who was handling it as well. I could never get one. And then, as you know, in 2023, I merged with Hairy Dog. Well, we merged, Barrel and Batch. And I sit in the office and they bring up, oh, we've got this barrel pick. Since you're picking the barrels, do you want to pick it? I'm like, yeah, what barrel pick do you have? And it turned out to be an A cell. I said, you're kidding me. All right, sweet. So anybody in the barrel space world?
How does that make you
allocated
feel,
to us.
Ray? How does that
We
make you
just-
feel that you've been denied for years and years and years? And then
You can deny, but I will just jump the fence.
the universe brought you together. It made it happen.
I will jump the fence to make sure I get that barrel. Anyway, another interesting fact of this is Simon McGorham, who is generally on these chats and can't fit in because you buggers are all on screen. But he asked on one of the other chats, do I try to pick a barrel based off the last barrel or a barrel that was really successful? On the lineup, I try to pick the best barrel. And believe it or not, I do keep the samples of those barrels I pick for when the barrel arrives so I can try them side by side. This is the only sample of a barrel that I've finished before arrival because I enjoyed it that much. So, cheers to you all. Pleasure to share to you here now and at home.
Cheers, guys and girls.
Oh, it's not shit at all.
Very not shit.
It's
I'm
bourbon.
I'm
It's
going to
never
use
shit.
that. That's going on the label bottle. That's going to.
Yeah, this
on the
is
bottle.
not shit. Anyway, G, if you want to take us through the
Tell us
single
about
barrel.
it, Ray. Why did you pick it? What are the qualities you picked this for? What do you love about it?
Yeah.
Well, I called it dark oak and burnt toffee, and that's just it's so for me. It's so woody. It's so deep. It's so much for me. There's so much base to it, and the dark toffee. I generally will get a lot of caramel out of this of the small batch as well, and obviously bourbon, but it more moves into like a burnt toffee flavor for me. And it was just on the 3 lineup barrels that I had to choose from was just insanely good. So I hope you agree, but it is.
I do agree. Absolutely do agree.
Yeah, it's just yeah, just a delicious,
Yep.
delicious.
Yeah, I like it. Yeah, it's just I agree.
It's not your usual. It's not your sweet caramels.
At all.
It's not sweet at all.
Yeah, I'm getting it. It's much lighter on the nose though, so I think there's definitely that kind of almost licorice toffee sort of thing on the nose. But I don't know if everybody gets that sort of John, you mentioned spearmint or mint earlier on as well on the palate, but there's there's an earthiness in there, right? You know, there's kind of like a vegetal earthiness in there as well.
Almost like
Almost like that character you get from a Scotch whiskey aged in a dunnage, but as we know, it's not.
It's not a good tasting note because you don't want to call it out, but I think you've expressed it better. But to me, it's like this bit of like, again, like a bit of that dusty, cardboardy packing, like a warehousey sort of earthy note coming through.
Yeah,
but in a good way, not like that cardboard you don't want in another whiskey.
Yeah, it's not wet cardboard, but it's that definitely that like earthy, rich. There's to me, like, this is so much more. I find, if you still got some of the small batch, go back to that, and it feels positively bright. And it's
gone. I wish I had more.
And on that as well, Teagues, Mr. Whiskey's My Jam has asked it to more corn content in the mash bill. No, so the H. Taylor single barrel and small batch is the same mash bill as Eagle Rare, Buffalo Trace, Stag, George T. Stag.
You cut me off on exactly the point that I was explaining.
Well, I did it better.
But yeah, what I was trying to say there was, small batch and this are exactly the same recipe, and this is where it goes down to individual barrels, uniqueness, warehousing, and everything else, potentially age, we don't know, but it is just, to me, the small batch now is just a fresh, bright, vibrant style of whiskey, and this is that more earthy, woody, and it to me it's like Buffalo Trace and
that is a very good point, Milne, because as you said, same barrels, same mash bill, same ABV, small batch prior to this, worlds apart, completely.
Oh yeah.
So.
Yeah, therein lies the beauty of the challenge of those tasters at Buffalo Trace, right? God, I wish they'd just, give me an interview. You know what I mean?
It's bloody viscous in the glass. It's juicy.
Yeah.
So there's a beautiful char note. There's a char note going through the whole thing, like wet tobacco. It's a beautiful note.
Yeah, so that's
having just tasted it, I think, the nose on this is way more rich and full than the small batch, but you still have that freshness, you still have that bright fruit, but I think this one just comes with a bit more herbal, a bit more menthol, a bit more kind of wood spice, and it's slightly richer style. But
how does it stack up about other single barrels that you've got and tried, Vidal? Since you dressed up for the occasion, let's get some commentary.
This is my drinking uniform. Like I said, it's my drinking uniform. Mate, I tell you, your pick, absolutely fantastic on palate. I'm not going to comment on the other ones because I will comment on Harrods because that one is absolute dog shit. Like, you tasted Benadryl, right?
Yeah,
that's what it tastes like, Benadryl.
It's not what I'm looking for.
Yeah, I know. Neither am I. That's why the bottle's still like 3/4 full. It's a hard drink. It is a hard drink.
You know what the interesting thing about that is, Vidal, is the buyers at Harrods or whoever's making the decision on what whiskey was going into those single barrels, they would have had the final say, right? So they pick their flavor. Buffalo Trace as a distillery don't get in the way of any barrel picks if they're for a customer. It's basically your decision. I mean, Millie and I had this mammoth task to run through. How many did they send? Was it 60 or 40 or something like that? It was for Buffalo Trace single barrels. They sent over samples that we had to take a customer through, and it was a full, we had to make a day of it because you have to have breaks, going through all these. 40 odd different samples. All of the samples were Buffalo Trace, aged, I think, 8 to 9 years, and they all tasted different. So when you come to a single barrel select like that, and you think that it is, in your eloquent term, dog shit, then you've only got the buyers at Harrods to blame, right? Because ultimately it's their decision. Now, what you can, kind of, I guess, decipher from that is that there is a huge amount of variation in the barrels and the flavor profiles. And I know even back when Ray was picking his first barrels, that the decisions were, how far from the original product or the main kind of release do I go? Do I go crazy funky, or do I just go a little bit outside the box and keep it kind of, interesting enough but close to the original? You know what I mean?
Mhm.
So there is a lot of that, and the decision that you make, then you kind of have to stand by for people to actually enjoy. But
You know what I've
it's a
decided on,
strange one.
G?
Hmm.
I decided on, if I like drinking it, I'm going to pick it.
There it is.
Well, that's it, right? Keep it simple. So I don't know. Maybe the guys at the Harrods
Question,
weren't
regards
actually
to
whiskey
barrel
drinkers.
program, are we seeing a slowdown of it? Like, are we seeing a lot of producers, especially Buffalo Trace, like saying no to a lot of customers who are like going, well, we don't really have the stock to do it anymore because everybody wants the barrel pit.
Everyone wants it. I've seen the forecast and the graph for the next 30 years for barrel picks. It is only upwards.
Yeah.
And Australia is playing a major part in that. So
is there enough stock? Because I know they went through, like, was it $1 billion upgrade of warehouses within Buffalo Trace? Is there enough to do barrel picks going forward for the next 30 years?
Yes. I think the broader question is probably what they are. We know from a volumetric perspective what it will be, what that split is. We can't then suddenly grow and go, okay, let's do 30, foolproof picks each year, and 2 Buffalo Trace. It's going to be led by core, but beyond that, I can only speculate what it will be. But yeah, the rarer and the harder to find whiskies aren't suddenly going to become a major part of our barrel picks until we have that supply of those whiskies. So that will be at least another 10 years away.
But to give you an example there, Vidal, of the expansion he just mentioned there is, over $1.2 billion spent. And of course, that involves all sorts of different things, from the stills to the fermenters. Like they built another 8 95,000 gallon fermenters. It's just phenomenal amounts of liquid. But, you can make all the spirit in the world, but unless you've got a warehouse and barrels, then you haven't got whiskey, right? So the majority of that money was spent on these state-of-the-art warehouses, which now hold up to almost 60,000 barrels each. Whereas, if you think about the biggest warehouse on our original site is Warehouse C currently, which holds maybe about 26,500 barrels. So each one of these hold almost 60,000, and we've probably been building one every quarter for the last 6 years, maybe 6.5 years. And as fast as we build it, we fill it, right? And so, you can imagine the amount of whiskey that is there or thereabouts, almost ready, right? Because of course, it's a waiting game, but huge quantities. So they're obviously then, they've got to make sure that their flavor profile is correct and this, that, and the other. So it's going to take a little bit more time, but in the next few years, we will see a lot more whiskey being released into the market, and that includes single barrel options. So yeah, it's exciting times for bourbon in general. But I've been reading a lot of press lately about, the bourbon boom is over. What a load of horse shit that is. Jesus. Certainly not in Australia.
What about Trump's tariffs?
I mean,
All right. So, what's everyone think of the single barrel?
So, do we get more shit?
yeah.
Since Canada's not going to take it, are we going to take it?
Huh?
Since Canada stopped selling American-made whatever,
All
do we
right,
get
Miguel,
Canada's
I'm just gonna say this.
allocation?
Something comes out in America, we might see it 6 months later.
To a year.
Let's wait 6 months and see what we're going to do.
Canada doesn't want
Anyway.
to sell it. Just send it over. Just send it over.
Yeah. No, don't worry. I ask enough, so we'll see what happens. But everyone's thoughts on single barrel seems to be very positive. Thank you very much.
Extra great.
Mate, great dram. Beautiful.
Amazing. Toffee
selection.
apple. That's what it is. It's a
Toffee apple, nice.
Yeah, I like that. Toffee apple. That's a good call. Yeah.
I really want
Very
some more.
viscous, right? Very oily.
When done too easy, like just gone. I
It's
can't
just
enjoy
It's gone.
Did you just roll your ball across the table? It's like it's just gone.
Yeah.
it.
It's like a mic drop moment.
Love it.
It's
Yeah.
I've got a couple single barrels here, and side by side, everything else is much more vanilla, sweet, a little bit lighter. Yours is a little bit more earthy, that tobacco, leathery kind of
Mm.
profile to it.
Yeah.
There's just a lot more going on.
Yeah, it's just-
They're all not rubbish at all, but that one's fantastic.
It's just deep and rich, isn't it? I don't know how.
Yeah.
That's what I'm like call it dark oak and burnt toffee, because to me that's just the base of it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a great pick, Ray. You've done a cracking job on that one, mate. And I think, Corey's
will say-
spot on
I will
about the depth.
I will say on that, G, thank you. I appreciate that. However, I'm always given a selection of amazing barrels to pick my favorite out of the lot. So I can't really go wrong.
Well, we have to give you really good barrels because you're always loaded. So it's like whatever he picks, we'll have to test it to see if it's okay.
That's it.
Yeah. I've seen this man reject like sample after sample from other distilleries. So you're right in the money.
I have sampled. I've rejected a lot.
This whiskey makes me want to like crack open a cigar, man.
Oh yeah,
100%.
definitely great.
Would be perfect.
I would like to know what everybody's favourite was tonight, not just on the stream, in the chats as well. I actually thought my favourite was the rye until I had the small batch, until I had the single barrel. But it's always
You're consistent.
everything's been pretty good. The beer's been good, the pairing's been good, the company's been okay.
Yeah, I'm biased probably because I'm fortunate enough to be able to taste small batch and straight rye. Not frequently, but enough to have a point where that single barrel is just more special and more exciting. So
Look at that. Andy's address details are just coming up along the bottom of the screen.
there's none here because I'm drinking it.
Right. Well, we
I'd say
can't run a poll, but we can put our hands up. So let's do a hands up poll, I guess. And anyone at home, still watching on Facebook? I know it's been a long night. If you're still there, thank you very much. But certainly throw your points and comments in the chat, because we will obviously choose a couple of people tonight who are going to get some prizes. But regardless of that, just looking forward to everyone's response. So, favorite of the night, rye?
Look,
Yeah,
I'm pretty partial to a rye.
You love your
Shut
rye?
up, John.
And it was close for me too with the rye.
Yeah,
Are you
well,
allowed
it-
to
Favorite small
put your
batch?
hand up more than once? Is that
Small
is that-
batch? No, you
well,
can't.
It's okay to be wrong, John. It's okay.
Single barrel? Favorite single barrel?
Go like my ex-wife. That's
I'm
fine.
biased.
Yeah, I'm all in for the
Single
single
barrel.
barrel.
I
Absolutely.
can see the hands. I think
Single
we're
barrel
there.
was phenomenal, though. That's the thing. Is none of them have disappointed tonight.
I'm just,
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
just reaching for one of these little.
And then you got to ask favourite beer, Ray.
Yeah, okay. Favorite beer. That's a good point. Thank you very much for bringing that up.
Yeah.
Okay, so I know my fave, but anyway, I know Dave's fave, I'm sure. XPA? Red?
delicious, but no.
do love the red. The red's phenomenal. But
I'm a
So
massive,
nice.
I'm a massive old fan.
And
that's the
The old has got to be
I love a red when
same.
no one
Yeah.
does. And like Ree said it earlier, like it's such an underrated style of beer, and
Yeah.
I'm all for that.
Yeah, Rihanna nailed it. The dark beer, love dark beer, so that pairing's spot on. I agree with that as well.
Oh, okay. Let's do one more because why not? 1, 2, and 3, obviously the pairings, because that's a different thing. 1,
It's
Well,
kind of
it's
the
gonna be,
same for
isn't there
me.
going to be like 6 or 9 different combinations to go
Yeah,
through?
yeah.
Just go through each person,
2.
and they say
Let's
their
go
favorite.
number 1, number 2. Let's go number 2. I actually like number 2 as a pairing better. Number 3.
Oh, yeah, 3
There
for
we go.
sure.
Three
Dave,
is
you
it.
like the red more,
Yeah.
but the pairing number 3 more. Cool. Love that. That's good. It's good. All right. Well, G, I don't know if you kept up with the chats that we put on the screen and everything, but G and Milne, it's your task. We got a couple of we got a voucher, $50 voucher,
Oh,
and
yeah.
a bottle of small batch to give away.
Very cool.
There's some really great
I didn't realize you wanted me to keep reading things as well as drinking whiskey
And
and beer.
you're also allowed to pick me, even though I'm on the stream. Just
Yeah, no, you can pick anybody. You can pick anybody for the interaction, however you like it.
I'll be honest. I think Mark had some amazing tasting notes tonight that I was very impressed with.
JD.
Mark's the
out.
only guy in the group that's been sniffing glue enough to call out the glue profile.
Yeah, I would love it. I would love it if you gave him a bottle of bourbon because he won't drink and he'll probably share it with me at least.
There's a Mark family and friends.
I think Mark and Brad have definitely. I'm being harsh and ignoring the people I know who work in spirits. So
I'm right here.
I don't
Well,
know if that-
when
if
we
that's
all get together, let's see how that goes for you.
Ah.
Google mask rubber. Like honestly, Mark, how high are you right now on a scale of 1 to 5?
My wife likes to snorkel. What can I say?
There he is.
Oh yeah, I bet she does.
Sorry, so Milne, who's got what?
So I think some of the most interesting tasting notes I've seen tonight have come from both Mark and Brad.
Yeah.
So who gets the $50? Who gets a small batch?
I think we're burning the small batch on Mark. It's just
Yeah, 100%.
going to end up with Jarvis.
Because
No,
I
actually, no, I think Mark deserves the small batch.
I think the other two is was obviously McGorum and Rihanna.
Yeah, I thought Rihanna had some good
Yeah,
tasting
she
notes.
done
Another
well.
one.
She did really well.
Rihanna is a cicerone, and so everything that she says about beer, I believe.
Sold. All right. So Mark and Brad. So Brad's getting a $50 voucher.
Brad can have the small batch.
Happy
I reckon
days.
flip it around.
All right.
I reckon Mark will get better miles out of the $50 voucher. He'll get something he'll enjoy, and it won't go to Jarvis.
All right. All right. So I'm going to turn off this stream very soon. Everyone at home who sat through the whole time, really appreciate it. Always
Good
nice
on you
fun
guys for
boys here.
lasting this long.
Sorry, what? Yeah.
And as usual, thank you, Ray, for pulling this shit show together once again every month without fail.
It's
We
bad.
do appreciate it.
I appreciate all the work that goes into it, Raymond. Thank you.
Thank you very
Yeah.
much. There's a couple more coming up.
Do you agree?
Yeah.
I best drop it now. So it's taken a very long time for this to happen, but Riders Tears Ice Wine, we got that coming up,
Nice.
Ooh,
Yep. and
nice.
we may end up with 2 batch ups next month. But basically, when I went to Tassie last time, I had the pleasure of going to Overeem and blending a stout and sherry. So their next stout release, which is with us. The time of that will come, but they're the next 2 that we got going. I know Young Henry's is on board, and we'll get a Tassie brewery on board for the to match with Overeem, I think, which will be fun. So it should be a good time. So jump in, get on, and thanks for the support. Everyone's loving the single barrel, and Cheers.
All right. Thank you,
Thanks,
Ray.
Ray.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, buddy.
Great night, as
Thanks,
usual.
guys.